We are having our conversation today around mental health and raising it to be a national conversation. We're also running it on our X Spaces today, so you can join the X Space and we will be giving you the mic at some point. But first, let's introduce Professor Lukoye Atwoli, who is a professor of psychiatry and Dean of Medical College East Africa, and also Deputy Director of the Brain and Mind Institute at the Aga Khan University. Prof, karibu sana.
Asante.
Thank you very much for joining us and welcome. We will be shedding a lot of light today on matters of mental health.
Thank you.
First of all, just dealing with just debunking the very many myths that people have of mental health and even just the interpretation of that. But first, Janet has the day's quote.
Yes, Diana Gishengo, who is part of the Institute for Social Accountability, said right here on this show, a ballot paper is the most expensive piece of paper in this country. How do you interpret that?
I think it's a tragedy. In what I might call normal societies, an election ought to be a pretty routine, run-of-the-mill affair, where people leave the house in the morning, pass by a polling station, vote, and then go to work, and then wait to hear in the evening who is the new MP, who's the new president, and so on and so forth. But in this country, it's a matter of life and death, literally, because people tie their entire fortunes onto the results of elections. And it's because of the system that we have set up where we assume that those that get elected then determine who lives and who dies, literally, by allocating resources in health, in security, in infrastructure, in education, and so on and so forth. So we've tied our fortunes to the outcomes of elections to the extent that nothing else really matters in this country. And the politicians have taken to it like, ducks to water. And, they determine almost every aspect of our lives. Yeah.
That's captured and summarized so well.
Said it so well,
Yeah.
And it leads into what we continue now seeing and suffering in this country because of the very many factors. Bad governance could be a cause of what we have.
Yeah.
Before we go into your work as a psychiatrist and the work that you did as a member of the task force on mental wellness, let's get back into the definitions, right? As a medical professional, what is mental wellness? What is mental illness?
Okay. So we begin by looking at health in general, and the WHO definition of health as a state of well-being and not just the absence of illness. And it is complete physical, psychological, social well-being, not just the absence of illness. So that is health. And so there's no health without mental health. Now, mental health is a state in which a person is able to deal with their challenges of day-to-day life and to be able to achieve their full potential. So that is mental health. Anything that detracts from that it challenges your mental health and causes psychological distress, and at the extreme end of that challenge becomes mental illness. Okay? So a mentally well person is able to take care of their affairs, is able to meet the challenges of day-to-day living, because there's, every waking hour there are difficulties that come your way and you deal with them, and is able to integrate well with the society, with the people they live together with, and is able, to plan and organize their life to achieve their full potential. So anything that happens that removes the ability to do that starts a trajectory towards mental ill health. Yeah.
So is it to do with regulating? I know that's a big word, but you're speaking to somebody who can have moments of, losing sight or focus of what's around them, but they're able to rein themselves in. Is that as a result of information, as a result of tools? What is it that differentiates one who can and one who can't?
So mental health is determined, like most things in our lives, by three main domains. The first domain is the biological. This is how you're made physically. And it includes how your brain is made and how you're wired. And there are very many things that determine this, beginning right from conception to the time you spend in your mother's womb to how you are born, where you are born, the circumstances of your birth, to your childhood and what you are exposed to as a child, to your nutrition, your physical health, and so on and so forth. So all those then determine how you are wired and how your brain develops into maturity. The second domain is the psychological domain. And this is basically how your brain works. So how you respond to stimuli that come to you, how you interact with the things, how you process things inside your brain, how you perceive yourself, how you perceive your place in the world and in the universe, and so on. So your way of thinking, the feelings, and how you deal with those. That is the second domain, psychological. And the third domain is social. This is where you find yourself, the people you find yourself amongst, the environment in which you live, the quality of the air you breathe. So all these are social things, the cultural rituals that you undergo, the traditions that you're exposed to. So those are all in the social domain, and it includes, religion, it includes culture, it includes tradition, includes the law, includes politics, and so on. So those three domains, the biological, the psychological, and the social, have a huge impact then on your mental health and on your overall well-being. As you can guess, if something is wrong with any of those domains, you will not be well. So we will just label it. We might say you're mentally unwell, but then you're not well. And this unwellness can even manifest physically, in the headaches that you talk about, in the aches and pains, in general discomfort. So you're not well if any of those domains is unwell.
Where's the economy?
The economy is in the social domain. So you're being overtaxed. You're not able to meet your day-to-day needs. That is going to cause distress. And that distress will then be expressed in your mental well-being. And it can trigger a mental illness in somebody who's vulnerable, or it might cause psychological distress in other people. And then the ability to deal with that. So the economy, so if you have an income, you have something to bank on when you're facing challenges. And this gives you a sense of well-being. If you do not have an income, your risk of mental illness is greater. So we find that people who are doing well and then they start going down economically, that their risk of mental illness is higher. We also find that there is a huge burden of mental illness among people who are socioeconomically lower in the ranks compared to people who are a bit better off. So poverty is a problem, and it's a risk for mental ill health.
Right.
And in addressing mental ill health, we have to address the socioeconomic status of individuals.
And just a reminder that we are on X soon, that you can participate and send your questions there. We'll be crossing over to the X space to have this conversation.
Right. Yeah. I was going to ask, to the best of your knowledge of our African history, what did mental health look like? How was it treated? How was it named? I think it's important to not think of it as a Western concept.
Absolutely.
As many people like to say.
So mental health, as I indicated earlier, is a part of who we are. As long as we've been humans, we've had an aspect of our lives that is in mental health. As long as we've been human, we've had mental illness. As long as we have been human, we've had psychological distress. I mean, even if you go back to the earliest humans on the African savannah, roaming among the wild animals and so on, there were moments of distress. There were people who couldn't cope with the situation and ended up with problems. So we've always had this. And you're absolutely right about naming and labeling, in the sense that, so today we have a phenomenon called depression. But depression, I mean, it's how we name it today. We collect a cluster of symptoms and say, if you have these symptoms over this period of time, then we will name that condition depression. But those symptoms were there even in the past. And we named them differently. So there are, if you go back into many traditions, there are, labels like witchcraft. There are labels like being cast. Oh, there are labels like that person is eccentric. that person is different. He doesn't do things like everybody else. There are labels like that person's ability to deal with the day-to-day issues is lower than everybody else. So this has always been there, and we've just named them differently. So a person with psychosis, we've said they're possessed. Maybe spirits, when we take the religious way of things, or by, even evil spirits in African tradition.
Yep.
There were good spirits and evil spirits, and we would say this person is possessed by evil spirits. But they would be displaying the symptoms of schizophrenia or bipolar disorder and so on. There would be people with epilepsy, people who get fits, and we would say, something comes over them and makes them unable to function for a bit, and then they're back and they're fine. Inamtoka, yeah. So we have had labels, but then these symptoms have always been there for as long as we've been human. For as long as we've been on this planet, we've always had people who have had challenges that are psychological and mental.
On our socials today, we are asking people, how's your mental health? And what are the solutions? And one of the reasons why we coined it this way is to first to also see people's perception and understanding of mental health.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Of course, many would think about the mental health conditions that come out and that they exhibit physically. But just take us through the spectrum.
Yeah.
When you have a mental illness, what's the lowest to the highest?
Yeah. So think about mental illness the same way we think about illness in general. You don't say when you're unwell, you don't say I have a physical illness. You say I have a fever. You say, I've been tested and they say I have malaria, or I have hypertension, I have diabetes, and so on. So there are hundreds of mental illnesses in much the same way as there are hundreds of illnesses that affect the body. And even those affect your mental well-being as well. And so the range is huge. We have mental illnesses that begin and manifest mostly in childhood. These are called the neurodevelopmental disorders, if you like attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, like autism spectrum disorders, and so on, and related conditions that manifest earliest in childhood. And then, and this is some kind of misnomer because most mental illnesses will begin before the age of 25. Actually, more than 75% of them will manifest one way or another before the age of 25. Then we have disorders that affect your mood. And these include major depressive disorder, which manifests with depressive episodes. So somebody gets low mood, loss of interest in usual activities, changes in sleep, changes in appetite, a sense of hopelessness, sense of worthlessness, and often they get suicidal ideation and might attempt or die by suicide. So those are the depressive episodes that make up major depressive disorder. Then another mood disorder that is big is bipolar disorder. And bipolar disorder has those depressive episodes, but will also have what we call manic or hypomanic episodes. And these are the opposite of a depressive episode. So a person who is manic will be extremely elated for absolutely no reason. They will be, they have a lot of energy. They have reduced need for sleep. They have an extremely optimistic outlook on their own abilities and on life and so on. So they become grandiose. They say things that everybody else thinks, hey, but that's a little hyperbolic, I mean, but they don't see it that way. And as it progresses, they become disruptive. They're not doing things that are supportive of the goals they have set for themselves. They become disruptive, and ultimately they become dysfunctional. And so they will need help. So that is a manic episode. So it's
progressing.
It progresses and gets extreme. So in the beginning, you might look very productive, but then as it progresses, you become less and less productive and more disruptive. So that is a manic episode. So if you have manic episodes and maybe plus or minus depressive episodes, you'd have bipolar disorder. Then we have the psychotic illnesses. And in these psychotic illnesses, there's a break with the reality. So you might be hearing voices that other people cannot hear. You might be seeing things other people cannot see, having experiences that do not make sense to other people. And so those conditions are characterized by having psychotic episodes. And so the psychotic episode is that break with reality where the world is different for you. The rules that exist in the world no longer apply in the world of a person who is psychotic.
But those things, Prof, actually happen? Like the person who has a psychotic episode,
yes,
are they actually hearing voices?
Absolutely. Absolutely. They're hearing voices. If you sit with them here, you might be having a conversation, but then they're looking on the side and saying, hey, you stop, wait, let me talk to this guy. They're actually hearing voices. And they're having experiences that are difficult for a person who's not having those experiences to understand. So in the world of a person with psychosis, the rules like I can't walk through a wall don't apply. So a face might show up from the wall. And so it's completely unpredictable for them. And that is why it's very distressing for a person with psychosis. Sitting here, they don't know what's coming next. You know, a voice is speaking to them and telling them, you know, you're the most useless fellow on earth. You know, you will not achieve the thing that you're planning to achieve. What this guy is telling you is all lies. Don't listen to him. Stuff like I've had patients who sit with me when we are doing an assessment, and the patient will tell me, so we will eventually arrive at a diagnosis, and I will tell them, so from my assessment, you have schizophrenia, you're going to need treatment, and the treatment will include medication. And as I say that, the guy turns this way and listens, he says, no, they're saying that treatment will not work. So I ask him, who's saying that? These guys who are talking to me. They're telling me that whatever you're saying is not going to work, and so I can't take your medication, and so on. So it's a complete break with reality when you have a psychotic illness. And there are many of them. Schizophrenia is one of them, where there's progressive deterioration in the ability of somebody to take care of themselves because of those psychotic symptoms. There's schizoaffective disorder, which has those psychotic episodes, but it also has mood episodes, so it's a combination. And then there are other psychotic illnesses that are caused by substance use. So when you use certain substances, then they induce psychotic symptoms. And there are psychotic illnesses that are also caused by general medical conditions, so things that happen to your brain, and they produce the same symptoms as if you had schizophrenia.
I wanted to ask in terms of, first of all, before I forget, at some point, I'd want to speak what the decriminalization of attempted suicide practically changes in Kenya. What does that mean? But for now, you know, you talk about mood swings. I think about either chemical imbalance or mood swings. Let me speak as a woman in the second act of life. So you're transitioning, and hormones play a big role. It's natural, it's normal. How can you tell whether it's a hormonal imbalance or whether it's something more? Because you will almost, without doubt, go through mood swings, go through bouts of anger, you know, sadness, especially if it's menopause, perimenopause. It's been documented. People have talked about experiencing themselves. So how do you draw the line?
So the biggest distinction between normal life experiences and mental ill health is social or occupational dysfunction or distress. So if something causes an inability for you to function and is progressive and it continues over a period of time, so, you know, days to weeks and so on, then it is a thing that we have to figure out and say, what is it? Is it? So even during menopause, you can get depression. Even during menopause, you can get a mental illness and so on. And I mean, so the hormones that regulate the lives of women have an effect on the brain. Just like the hormones that regulate the lives of men also have an effect on the brain. And they manifest in different ways. So estrogen, progesterone, and so on, and testosterone for men. They have an effect on the brain, and therefore they have an effect on how you feel, how you think, and how you behave. The distinction is if your thinking, feeling, or behavior is firstly disrupting your social or occupational functioning. In other words, your interaction with people, your ability to work or go to school, or you know, do the things that are expected of you. or the extent to which it is causing distress. So there's psychological pain. Has crossed into the realm of mental ill health.
Okay.
Yeah. So normally, if I may say so, you might experience those mood swings, as you call them, but then you recognize them. You're like, this is happening because I'm going through this
You catch
phase.
yourself almost.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you're able to continue functioning despite those things happening, and you're able to deal with them, and you're able to tell people, hey, I need a moment. Give me a moment, and I'll be right back. and that's fine, and that's normal. But when you are unable to do that, when you're unable to go to work, when you're unable to interact with people socially, when you have psychological distress, then it has crossed into the realm of mental ill health, and you probably need to see someone and get support. So the reason this happens is that we have a capacity. Everybody has the capacity to deal with things that happen to them. It's only when that capacity is overwhelmed by the things you're facing, the things you're experiencing, that you start crossing into psychological distress towards mental ill health. But everybody has some capacity, and we call this resilience. So you are able to, meet somebody makes your life a little difficult, they say nasty things to you, but then you bounce back and you're like, that's just a nasty person and I'm able to deal with this. You're able to, there's a time of the month when there's more month than money in your pocket, and you're like, okay, fine, I will cross this bridge, and next, at the end of the month I'll be fine, and so on. And that's normal. You have a child who gets, pneumonia, they go to hospital, they need treatment and so on, and you're able to navigate that and so on. But then when your ability to deal with these things is overwhelmed, and so you are either paralyzed, or you are extremely distressed, or you are unable to, attend to other activities of daily living, then you're crossing into mental ill health, and so you need external resources to be brought in to support you, to bring you back to your normal space. So
Right.
that will be crossing into mental ill health. Yeah.
We're about to go on a break, but just before that, we of course want to acknowledge our listeners on X. The space is still on. Of course, you can just search for it up. If you just search NTV, or if you are a follower of NTV, it'll just pop up immediately. You open the X app. You can ask for the mic if you do have a contribution. Of course, like I said, we'll have quite a few fixers coming in and speaking to us. Amongst them will be Stella, who's a mental health champion, and of course, she's also a practitioner in the mental health world at Ushauri Wellness, and we'll also speak to her lived experience when we come back after the break. I'm seeing quite a few comments on YouTube, massive comments, and there's one that really struck me, and I want to come back to it after the break, Prof. It says, alcoholism is just one of the escape routes Kenyans use. Things like gambling, social media addiction, porn are also escape routes we use to cope. We as people need to be self-aware and to admit that nexus between addiction and mental health is one that is a big pain point for Kenyans.
Absolutely.
So I think we need to dive into it a little bit and see what that looks like and how we can help it just when we get back from the break. Seeing a few more comments. Good morning, Lukoye wa Atwoli W. And then hyphen and Atwoli tuned in. What are the causes of dementia? Maybe just briefly speak to that before we go into the break. We have about a minute.
So dementia is a neurodegenerative condition. In other words, it is loss of function, which affects your ability to remember things, ability to record memories, and so on and so forth. And the causes are many. Some of them are biological, as I said, so changes in the brain, which make it difficult for you to do the things that you're supposed to do. And some of them, so there are some that are determined genetically, so that you are vulnerable to dementia from the time you're born or conceived. And some of them are caused by toxins that we take, including substances like alcohol and so on. Some of them are caused by injuries to your brain, which can be because of trauma that hits you, or micro traumas that happen inside without your abilities. Like hypertension can cause bleeds, which can result in dementia, and so on and so forth. So there are multiple causes for dementia.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ask for the mic. We shall give you the mic on the X space. Also, you can post your comments and questions on our YouTube and Facebook feeds. You can also call in at some point. We'll open up the mics for you to call. Professor Lukoye Atwoli, a psychiatrist, dean at the Aga Khan University Medical College, who is also the deputy director at the Brain and Mind Institute. You'll tell us what this is about. The Brain and Mind Institute. You'll tell us after the break. Absolutely. But we'll be back shortly after this break. Let's have this conversation. Today, it's the X Space on broadcast. It's our digital baraza. Back in a moment.
Just now, there's a picture I saw yesterday, and the picture has a woman leaning like this, and somebody has written periods, pregnancy, menopause, while men just live their lives. I don't get it.
Right.
And she's stressed. But
why me, Lord?
It's really funny. But I heard you at some point mention, with men there's a testosterone level. But I don't know whether we talk about hormonal evolution in men. We've talked about menopause, we've talked about periods, all these things. How does that manifest in men?
Men also get andropause. At some point your testosterone dips, and that has effects on your physical and psychological functioning. So testosterone is when there's an excess of testosterone, I mean it's a very disruptive hormone. It drives a lot of our violent impulses. It drives a lot of our, exuberant actions that we do. So it does have an impact on your mental wellness and on your functioning. And then later in life, when it dips, then it can cause somebody to become more withdrawn. It can cause somebody to be less active. It can cause somebody to, lose interest in the things that they used to enjoy doing, and so on and so forth. So there is an andropause also in men. And hormones, there are numerous hormones. And estrogen, progesterone, testosterone are just some of them. They are related to sexual functioning, but also then they affect your mental functioning. But there are many, many other hormones, including those that regulate your sugar, including those that regulate other aspects of your functioning, like the corticosteroids that affect how you feel as well, and how you sleep, and so on, and how you experience stress in the world. And so there are numerous hormones that are common to both men and women that affect our social, psychological, and biological functioning.
All right. We just, we're about to give the mic to someone on X, right?
On X.
But just before that, there was that question on the drug and substance abuse.
Use versus abuse.
Right, use versus abuse. And that nexus and how they interplay with mental health. Because someone on X has just, on YouTube has just asked again, can substance abuse be the cause of mental health? E.g. people who smoke weed, can that lead to mental illness? Just before we go into the X space.
So there is a whole range of mental illnesses, as I said, and then there are substance-related mental disorders. Substance-related mental disorders include substance abuse. So there's substance use, and then there's substance abuse. So you can use alcohol, for instance, but then when you lose control over your use of alcohol, you're drinking more and more than you even intend to drink. You're drinking inappropriately when you shouldn't drink. You're showing up to work drunk. You're unable to control your habit. Then you're abusing alcohol. And you can abuse alcohol, and then you can be dependent on alcohol. And when I say alcohol, it's any substance. You can be dependent on it. So being dependent means you cannot function without it. You feel like you're not complete without it. So what happens is that the substance takes over the brain centers that make you feel complete, that make you feel human. And without the substance, then you feel less complete, you feel less than human. And so you feel like I have to have this substance in order for me to function. That is substance dependence. And so those are substance-related conditions. But then, so the use of the substance itself can be a manifestation of mental illness. And then there are people who have other mental illnesses, but then they use substances to try and cope with the symptoms. So you might have schizophrenia, and you take cannabis to calm you down. Even when the voices are speaking to you, you take a substance to try and deal with the symptoms of your mental illness. So the primary problem there would be a mental illness that you have. And then the substance is basically a form of self-medication. So if we treat the primary mental illness, then you will not feel the need to use the substance anymore. Somebody with depression who's drinking a lot of alcohol in the hope that it will make them feel better, and then it just makes them feel worse. Somebody with, bipolar disorder who is abusing tranquilizers, for instance, and so on and so forth. So it's a form of self-medication. Is you think that if I take this substance, I'll feel better or I will behave better, and then you start abusing the substance. You know that there are people who, abuse even cold medication. Because they feel like when I take it, I feel better. And then they continue taking it even when they don't have a cold because it makes me feel better.
So there are many people, Prof, who are speaking to us, even sending their comments, and we'll be reading some of these comments and questions on YouTube, on X as well. There are many comments and questions. We have somebody who's calling themselves the Psych Sleuth who has requested the mic, and he'd like to speak. Psych Sleuth, you've got the mic. Let's hear from you. Good morning.
Psych Sleuth with the hand up. Good morning, Psych.
I can see your mic has been unmuted, but we can't hear you, Psych.
Oh,
okay, I guess
it actually says he's a forensic psychologist. Okay, now he's speaking. I think we've got some levels. Good morning, Psych.
Let's see if we can get that sorted. As we do that, let's also listen to what others are saying. MP James Mwangi Gakuya is also on the X Space, says, great topic that we must, requires attention from all of us, and we must continue having this conversation. I've received some messages here as well from Victor. Victor says, I look forward to hearing a lot on addressing the stigmatization in all places, especially in workspaces. He says, I write as a recovering alcoholic, sober since 2016 and diagnosed with bipolar 2 in 2014. That will come into the issue of stigma and how then that stigma also comes to play in everything that we are seeing and everything that we do. There was another question here. Is there a natural way of treating these mental health issues without the use of drugs, considering the addictiveness and dependence that comes with it?
And he's given examples of, I think these are addictive medicines maybe, or considered addictive. Quetiapine, I hope I've said that right, Zocet and the rest.
Good question.
So the medications that are used to treat mental illnesses, they are meant to go usually to the brain and cause certain changes to the chemicals in your brain, which we call neurotransmitters, and therefore try and restore the balance so that you can function as normal as possible. You use those medications because you need them. And as long as you're using them because you need them, you're not addicted to them. You need them. It's like if I have hypertension, I need medication, and I will use that medication to regulate my blood pressure. I am not addicted to a hypertensive medication. I need them to function. If you have diabetes and you need insulin, without insulin, you will not survive. So you need it. It's not like you're dependent or you're addicted to insulin. You use it because
this is a need.
Yeah. And so the same way with the medications that are used to treat mental illnesses. However, it's not only medications that are used to treat mental illness.
We'll get into the other alternatives. And of course, even the question of long-term dependency. But we have a caller called Kiplagat, and we don't want him to drop. Good morning, Kiplagat.
He's on the X Space.
Oh, he's on the X Space.
Paul Kiplagat on the X Space.
Good morning.
Good morning.
All right. What's your question for Prof or your contribution to this topic on mental health?
My question today is about, I want to ask, how do you differentiate between a stress and a mental health disorder?
I think that's a good question. So stress is when, as I talked earlier, I said everybody has a level to which they can manage, the challenges of day-to-day life. When that level is overwhelmed, then you might experience stress, which I call some psychological distress. And if it continues and completely overwhelms you, it can go into mental ill health. So it's a whole spectrum. There's good stress. When you're facing an exam or a test or an interview, you might feel a little stressed, overwhelmed. And that then stimulates you to plan and organize yourself so that you deal with that challenge when you face it. So you might prepare better for the exam, you might prepare for that interview and so on. So that's good stress. And everybody needs that kind of stress every once in a while so that they you don't feel like, hey, I know everything, I can fix everything. You need a bit of a challenge every once in a while to remind you that, there are things out there that you are not able to manage. And that's good stress. Then there's bad stress. And this is stress that causes you to freeze or causes you to become unable to function in everything else. So you're facing this exam, you become anxious, you are unable to read, you are eventually unable to do that exam, or when you do it badly. Now that's bad stress. And that is still not yet mental ill health. That is just stress. Challenges in dealing with day-to-day issues. And with that, you can get support. You can get somebody to help you with counseling. In other words, help you look at the resources you have available to you to deal with these day-to-day challenges. And that's helpful. When it crosses into mental ill health, that means that it's causing extreme distress and it's causing inability to function socially or occupationally for prolonged periods of time, then you need a lot more intervention than just counseling. You need a lot more intervention than using the resources that are available to you. So you might need medication, you might need psychotherapy, and you might need advice on how to adjust your social environment in order to thrive, in order to do better than you're doing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Ybecki Omingo on X. You've requested the mic. You have the mic, Ybecki. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Thanks for joining our X Space today. What's your question or comment?
All right. Mine is a comment. First of all, I'd like to thank the NTV and Professor for such an insightful morning. And I love speaking about mental health, and I'm an advocate for mental health. So I like telling my story as we move. And as for me, I did everything society said would make me happy. I went to school, I got a job, I found a partner, I even got a child. From the outside, it looked like I had it all together. But inside, I felt a weight I couldn't explain. I was not happy, I was not fulfilled. I thought I should be doing a bit more. There was still a gap that was missing. And I believe that I know how being happy feels like, and I wanted to have that happiness all the time by myself without being supported by somebody else or a substance from outside. So basically, it was during this period of deep reflection and research, I decided to seek support from a psychiatrist. So I did a few tests. After a few assessments, I was diagnosed with chronic anxiety. Yeah, so with the support of the therapist and, of course, my family, I began to unpack years of suppressed emotions and pressures. That process didn't just bring relief, it brought clarity, it brought empowerment and healing. Now, that's when I knew I could not keep this information to myself. It became my mission to ensure that others, especially in my community, where mental health is often stigmatized, could also access the same. Now, that vision bared Ushauri Wellness Africa, which is an NGO that deals with mental health. So we talk at Ushauri Wellness, we walk the journey of healing with individuals, with families, and with groups. We work mostly in Nairobi and Kajiado County. We partner with organizations and schools, women collectives, and even at workplaces. So we offer psychoeducation. Mostly we just inform people what mental health is about. As Prof has said, the spectrum. When do you need medication? When do you need therapy? When do you just need to do a bit of self-care, just relax and take some time out? Yeah. And yeah, so basically that's what we do. And also family therapy.
Right.
Our approach blends professional, psychological tools and deep understanding of the African culture context. Because again, if we are not sensitive about how someone was brought up and their cultures and beliefs, then you find a disconnect. And for therapy to be successful, that therapeutic relationship is very, very important. So we have to have a way that we deal with each other in a manner that understands the background. What I may consider normal in my culture could be very abnormal in someone else's culture. So yeah, that is also a big contributing factor in the success of a therapeutic process.
Thank you, Stella. I wanted to ask you something. Pull on a thread you just started. You said, I did everything right, what was required of me, but still felt an incredible weight. I know a lot of young people that you work with, because you are with them on the ground in Kajiado, will say, I've done everything required of me, but I still feel that weight as well. Or, the country doesn't seem to be moving for me. What's the effect of our economy and our social, our psyche as a nation on mental health from your perspective, working with young people on the ground? Oh,
it is a very huge factor.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
No, go on.
I'm saying the effect of the economic situation and the political climate. All of this affect the mental health, especially during the 25th last year. We had a few people who we work with, and until now we're still unpacking some of the traumas that they went through. Some people lost their lives. Yeah. It's not as easy as you would. It's something that it takes a bit of a long period to process. So it affects them greatly, because if you don't have something to eat today, believe me, and you have somebody depending on you at home, that will affect you properly. And if you do not then take care of yourself, if you do not manage to understand, as Prof has said, okay, my month is more than my money, and how can I deal with it constructively? You can find people even resorting to crime as an impulse to try and solve what they think there's a presenting problem and there's an underlying solution. So you can find somebody's presenting problem is, maybe I just don't have enough cash, and then the underlying solution is they probably do not have, they cannot be able to sustain themselves because they did not have a proper education, then they did not have a proper job. Then you see, it's a whole trickling effect. So even if it's a financial situation, assess yourself from here. What can I do that is constructive and that will not, suppress what I am doing and solve today's problem, but tomorrow, next week, the problem becomes greater. I don't know whether I'm communicating.
Yeah,
you are 100%.
Prof, can you weigh in on that as well?
No, I fully agree that the political climate, the socioeconomic situation, these are determinants of mental health. And I keep saying every so often that the leaders we put in positions of power must be cognizant of the fact that everything they do and say is affecting the mental health of the people that they're leading. And so they need to be careful about the words they use. They need to be careful about the things they say. So for instance, I think people were talking about what happened last year during the protests, and I think the speaker has just pointed that out.
Right.
And our politicians speak very cavalierly about this. They speak very loosely about this, and they do not appreciate the fact that the things they are saying are having huge impacts on the psychological well-being of the people who are involved in these protests.
Okay, let's just pause there. Yeah. I believe we have a caller on the line just before the break. Phil, who is the caller, so that we can bring them in and they can share their question or contribution? Alvin, right. Okay, we have a caller, Alvin. Alvin, thank you for calling in. Please let us know if you have a question for Prof or any contribution to the conversation.
Oh, it's a question.
Okay, please go ahead.
It's on mental health issues. I wanted to know, since most people we get to realize that you have a problem once the problem is already big. So I wanted to know, like, what are the simple signs that maybe one is disturbed? Because I mostly get to see, let's say in terms of addiction, you just don't know it automatically. It takes time, but no, before now getting to know when you are already addicted, how can we tell? What are the signs? How can one get to know it in the early stages that you have this problem?
Right.
Thank you, Alvin.
Thanks,
That's a good
Alvin.
question. And Prof, you'll respond to that after this break. Let's go into the break. The conversation continues on X Space, on YouTube and Facebook, and Nation FM and NTV. It's at 9 a.m. We are still here, so keep it here. We'll be back shortly. Pause there. Our conversation continues on X Space, on YouTube, Facebook, Nation FM, and NTV. And we have Professor Lukoye Atwoli here with us in the studio. We're talking about mental health today. There's a question that was asked just before we went to the break, Prof, by Alvin. The telltale signs.
Right.
How do I know that what I have is the telltale? And I want to add this to this other question by Rabilo on X, who says, can you give referrals of experts that we can share what we are going through and can help us? Mental illness is real. I've spent a lot of money for treatment in hospitals, but I suspect I'm mentally ill.
Okay. I think beginning with the last one, if you suspect you're mentally ill, you probably need to speak to a mental health professional. So that's one potential sign that I'm not okay. I'm not feeling well. Then you need to speak to someone. Where can you find these people? All sizable public hospitals ought to have mental health services or a referral pathway to a mental health specialist. And mental health services begin with counseling. You might just need support with day-to-day living. How do I deal with this challenge? I'm struggling a little bit. And counseling should be available to you. It might require, psychotherapy. So maybe I'm a lot more anxious than can be explained by the things that I'm experiencing. And so you might need a psychologist to have a conversation with you, figure out the problem, and develop a solution that works for you. You might need a psychiatrist, in which case you have severe mental illness. It requires not only the psychotherapy, but might also require medication and might require social adjustments in your life. So any public hospital that you go to ought to have mental health services or a referral to mental health services. Several private hospitals in Kenya also do have mental health services. In Nairobi, in the big cities, I think you should be able to find a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a counselor in many of the big private hospitals as well. We have Mathari National Teaching and Referral Hospital, which is the apex mental health facility in this region, to be honest. And
In the region?
In this region. It has specialists in various areas of mental health. And if somebody went there and asked for help, they would be able to be supported. And if you check on the website of Mathari National Teaching and Referral Hospital, you will find a hotline, which you can also call and get support either on phone or be advised on where to seek help. So those services are available.
So the expectation here is when you go to a health facility, the health professional that you come into contact with may be able to tell that what we are dealing with here could be something that I need to refer you to somebody else. But this is what this person is saying, that my challenge is I have gone to many facilities before and I have spent a lot of money for treatment in hospitals.
So I fully agree that we still have a lot of work to do, even within the health professions, to ensure that our colleagues who see clients and patients are able to discern and say, this is psychological, this is a mental health issue, and I need to refer you to a professional, or I need to provide this service for you. So this is ongoing work. We are not there yet. But we train, so doctors, clinical officers, nurses have some training in mental health now. And we are hoping that this continues so that they are able to recognize signs of mental ill health and initiate support and refer appropriately. So this is important. However, the person going to the hospital, if you feel like your problem is also affecting you psychologically, it's okay to say so to the provider and say, hey, I think there's a psychological component here. How can I get help?
So that they can refer you as well.
Absolutely.
I wanted to speak again before I forget about the decriminalization of attempted suicide. Can you speak to that? What does it mean again practically in terms of mental health in Kenya?
So Kenya, like many Commonwealth countries, inherited archaic legislation from our colonizers. And this legislation included a law that said that a person who attempts suicide commits a crime, and that they should be taken before a judge, and if convicted, they should be jailed and fined and all those kinds of things. And this has remained in our laws for the longest time. We think it's a stupid law. We think evidence now says if somebody attempts suicide, they are going through severe psychological distress or they have a mental illness and they require help, not punishment. So over the past few years, there have been many people involved in advocacy to remove this law from our statute books. So there is a petition right now before the National Assembly, which I submitted several months ago, that is meant to move Parliament to repeal that law that says it's a criminal offense to attempt suicide. But in parallel, many organizations went to court, including the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, working together the Kenya Psychiatric Association and Aga Khan University and several other players, and petitioned the courts to declare that law to be unconstitutional. And earlier this year, the courts did declare that that law is unconstitutional because it offends the right to access to health, the right to being treated with dignity, and it's discriminatory because a person with psychological distress that leads to attempted suicide is being treated differently from a person with hypertension who requires antihypertensives and so on. So instead of taking this person with suicidal ideation to a healthcare provider, we are taking them before a judge, and yet we are taking the person with diabetes to a doctor. So it was declared to be unconstitutional and therefore null and void. So what that means is that if somebody attempts suicide, a police officer could still arrest them. And today, even today, the police officer could still arrest them. But then when they're arraigned before a judge, the judge will say the law under which you're charging this person has been declared unconstitutional. So that person will no longer be prosecuted after that. However, the only way to prevent a police officer from arresting me because I attempted suicide is to repeal that section of the penal code. And so Parliament still has work to do. They have to act and repeal that section of the penal code. I don't know any parliamentarian who thinks it's rational to take a person who has attempted suicide before a judicial officer who is not trained to treat mental illness instead of taking them to hospital.
And I know there was a bill that was taken to Parliament to amend the penal code and remove not just this section but also others, even how we describe people.
Vagabond.
What was the other word for somebody who's mentally
like they say I forget the word, but it's a legal thing about lack of capacity and so on. So insanity and things like those.
How to describe those? It went to Parliament and it's been sitting there. Some of those things that you ask yourself. So some laws can come to Parliament and they pass very fast. Others will take long and forever to move, and they have a direct impact on citizens.
I think stigma is a big deal. And there's stigma in our National Assembly. There's stigma in Parliament towards mental illness. I have had parliamentarians speak very crudely about people with mental illness. And I think that needs to change. It needs to change. I know that,
think it's their own coping mechanism.
To not deal with reality.
Their
own reality.
I will not venture opinions on the mental state of our parliamentarians. But I think the way some of them deal with issues around mental health is worrisome. And if I used statistics alone, I might say that there is a proportion of parliamentarians who need psychological support and who need mental health care themselves. And this should be obvious to them. I know that if
sometimes it's obvious to us.
It's obvious to civil. I can't venture specific opinions, but I would say that based on statistics alone, there's a proportion of parliamentarians and our politicians who require mental health services.
Right.
But I can't just pinpoint individuals.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I do know that today, if the president and the leader of majority decided that there is a law that needs to be repealed, it will be done today. There will be a special sitting of Parliament, and they will debate it. They will have the first reading, second reading, committee of the whole house, everything, and it will be repealed today by midnight. I would just suggest that maybe they need to make this suicide law a priority and decide that we are going to remove this from our statute books, that it's a stupid law. It makes us look bad. It makes us remain in the Victorian era when we are trying to become progressive. And I just wish that somebody woke up tomorrow and said, today we are making it a priority to repeal this stupid law. And that would be a great day for this country and for mental health.
Hopefully with enough advocacy, that can happen.
Yeah.
You know, you were talking about, and suicide is a very triggering conversation,
Absolutely.
I know. But I've just remembered not too long ago, I think she's from the UK, an influencer who died by suicide because of pregnancy complications. And there was a link to medical gaslighting. What is your understanding on how are you trying to contribute to the fight against medical gaslighting, which affects a lot of women, whether it's, you know, misdiagnosis, whether it's literally gaslighting, like it's in your head what you're feeling. So just speak a little bit to that.
What's medical gaslighting?
What is medical gaslighting?
So no, I think the literature shows that women get poorer outcomes for the same conditions compared to men. If a woman goes to hospital and says, you know what, I have a headache and so on, somebody might write it off and say, hey, it's just your hormones, you go home, you'll be fine, and so on. And yet, if a man goes and says, I have a headache, they get a CT scan and we find, oh, you have a bleed in the brain, and then they get treatment. And so women get poorer outcomes because of assumptions that we make about the symptoms that they're experiencing. And I think that's a problem that we in the medical profession need to fix. It's the same way minorities are treated the same way. So if you're in the US and you're black like me, and you show up in the hospital with a complaint, chances are you'll be treated differently than if a person who is Caucasian male shows up and has exactly the same complaint, they'll be treated differently. This is something we have to deal with within the medical profession, and more so in mental health, where if I went to hospital and say, I'm not sleeping well, I'm feeling a little low and so on, that complaint might be taken more seriously than if a woman went to hospital and said, hey, I'm not sleeping well, I'm feeling low and so on. And, hey, that's a woman thing. Yeah, that's how being a woman is supposed to be. Being a woman is not supposed to be distressful. So if you're feeling distressed, if you're having difficulties, we need to take those complaints seriously. We need to investigate them. We need to give you a diagnosis and tell you what the problem might be, and we need to deal with it. Right. So I think that is something that we have to do.
Are there structural reforms? Because I was thinking about it, when we're more informed, we're able to make better decisions. We'll ask for a second opinion, or we'll push back even against a doctor, which is not something a lot of us are taught to do, but that's a privilege. So are there structural reforms that could help with medical gaslighting, medical misogyny, even in mental health?
Yeah, so the training programs that we have for doctors, for health workers in general, are meant to incorporate elements that help us to recognize among ourselves when we are starting to treat somebody differently because of their status. So we are meant to introspect, we're meant to reflect upon our practice and have peers whom we discuss care with, who tell us, hey, I think you treated this person a little differently. Maybe you didn't follow the evidence, you followed some other thing in your mind. So that's ongoing. I think it requires more advocacy. But I also think we train our healthcare workers to get feedback from the patients and the clients. And we'd be happy today, it's okay for you to push back when you're having a conversation with a doctor, with a healthcare provider, to say, hey, you need to explain this a little more. Why do you think I have this particular condition and not something else? What is your reasoning? What is the thinking behind the decision you're making?
Right.
It's okay.
I've told you this and you've dismissed it.
Yeah.
Can you write down that you've dismissed it and why?
Yeah, I would like you to take this a little bit more seriously. And that's okay. Right. And my responsibility as a doctor would be to say, hey, this is why I am thinking the way I'm thinking. I'm not dismissing it. I am just using evidence that most people who have this particular thing, this is how they end up, and most people who don't have this is how they end up. So I need to explain my thinking process. And if you're not satisfied with that explanation, then you should have a right to speak to somebody else and see if the thinking is the same. Yeah.
You know, we love, unfortunately as Kenyans, we love over-the-counter and quick remedies, and someone is asking about the same here. Sir Nixon is asking, are there over-the-counter products that may help manage symptoms associated with mental health disorders, and at what time does one engage them? I want to say I highly doubt that, but you are the prof,
I think, if you're having psychological distress or signs of mental illness, you need to see a professional who will get more information, do tests, and tell you what they think the problem is, and then provide you with potential solutions from which you can choose from. It is not wise to go and buy stuff over the counter to try and manage that, because for many of these conditions, the longer you delay care, the more difficult it is to manage. They are toxic to the brain. If you have untreated depression for a long period of time, it changes your pattern of thought, it changes your ability to function, it changes your interactions with other people, and some of these changes will become difficult to reverse when you're treated. So the sooner you see a professional, the better. But there are things you can do to prevent mental illness.
I was going to ask that. Is there a version of over-the-counter, perhaps if things are not at a point where they require medical intervention, but small interventions you can make?
So number one, take care of your physical health. So healthy diet, watch what you eat, because literally you are what you eat. That's important. Number two, get adequate rest. So don't overstretch yourself. So sleep, get adequate sleep. People who sleep, people who get sufficient sleep have lower risk of mental illness than people who don't get sufficient sleep. Physical activity. These bodies are not made to sit the way we are sitting. They're not made to just be sedentary. You need to be active. You need to move, and that helps the brain as well. Breathing. Many of us don't know that you have to breathe. Your body needs...
We talked about this once, the breathing exercises.
Breathing exercises. Very good for you. And so on. So these are common sense things that you can do to improve your mental health and improve your physical health as well. So not medication, but activities, sleep, diet, and so on and so forth.
I'm hoping that before the top of the hour, we can list or give some referral pathways which are accessible, whether it's call lines, because I think people do have an assumption, maybe I shouldn't say assumption, that there's a belief that access to treatment is expensive, access to even a consultation, but there's helplines, etc.
I should say, yes, mental health care, just like physical health care, is not cheap. I mean, it is not cheap. And so we have to invest in mental health care. Governments have to put money into it. They shouldn't assume that these services can be provided for free, that these services are just available somehow, because you have to train the health workers, you have to have the facilities, you have to have counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists, doctors, and so on. You have to have them, and they're not free. They don't just materialize out of the thin air. You have to invest. Governments have to invest. We have to invest as individuals also in our own mental well-being. So there will be a cost to it, but we have to find a way. If, as government, if we decided this is a priority, we would say, for instance, that access to these services will be paid for by government. so that you can have access to them.
Before I forget, sometimes it's good to put buzzwords, things which have become buzzwords, and maybe we need to unpack them a bit more. Narcissism comes up a lot. Narcissistic abuse is one thing, but narcissism, somebody could say, no, I'm just confident. So I understand first we have somebody who is on X. We'll hold that question, Prof, so that we can unpack it. Phil, who did you say?
Chesangol Joshua, who has asked for the mic, and he has the mic now. Chesangol, good morning. You can take the mic. Chesangol, you can unmute your mic. Has he dropped? Dropped again?
Yes.
Right. It dropped, but
narcissism vis-a-vis confidence.
Right. And in general, the way we just kind of have made it commonplace to use serious mental health terms. I'm depressed. You're a narcissist. I have ADHD. You know.
And the dangers in that,
So all these terms you've mentioned are technical terms. So there's narcissistic personality disorder. So it's a disorder. And what it means is that there's a cluster of symptoms that a person has that have continued for almost all their life. They've continued for a long period of time. And for narcissism, it would be centering me, centering oneself. Like everything is about themselves, and they're the greatest, they're the best, and everything else falls off. And if you try to challenge that, then there are consequences.
But Prof, one could argue we are all the center of our own universe.
The main
what's the line between?
So actually,
I am the main character in my story, and I'm a narcissist.
On the contrary, the story of humanity is a story of being one with others. The story of humanity is about centering the experience with other people. And you can test this. I mean, if a person isolates themselves and keeps to themselves and does things on their own, there's a problem. They are not fulfilled, they get distressed, they don't achieve any of their goals. But it's only by working with other people, it's only by being part of a community that we find ourselves. So the story that we are the center of our universe, we are the main character in our story. It's not human. It's not human. We are part of a bigger story, and that is the story.
But we're obsessed with people who center themselves. Cult leaders and you're the Prof, let me not say they have symptoms of narcissistic personality, but I know that there's a charismatic energy. So you see all these people. Later, either the people who've survived narcissists will say almost similar things across the board in terms of the what is it called?
The pool.
The malfunction or the red flag. That's true. But
people like those are a side effect of our brain development, because we evolved to be part of a group. And naturally, groups develop leaders. And the leaders, the groups that follow leaders tend to be more successful than groups that don't follow leaders. And so naturally, our brain has evolved to recognize leaders and to follow what they tell us, sometimes non-critically. And so the cult leaders, the dictators, the terrible politicians, and so on, emerge as a side effect of that human evolutionary need. The normal would be that we are part of a group. Yes, there are leaders in various aspects, not one leader who is a leader in everything. And that we are a little critical about the things they say. So we are not just unthinkingly following, but we are following because it makes sense to us. So that would be the normal. But the side effect of that, obviously, then is that there are groups that coalesce around these charismatic fellows, and these fellows are self-centered, they have issues, they have personality disorders, or they're just, so they have antisocial personality disorder. So they enjoy causing suffering, causing pain for other people, and leading people in ways that are not useful for them. It's a side effect of how we have just developed and how we have evolved.
Using that to say, I mean, how we use this in, you will hear many times nowadays in just normal talk, other person's the narcissist.
That's
the narcissist.
So this is misuse.
How do you draw this line?
I think
the term, just because somebody was assertive in driving their point across. And you felt like, they were not listening to you. So you labeled them the narcissist. And so it's you actually who's the
So those labels are dangerous. It's useful for us to say, if I'm going to say somebody has narcissistic personality disorder, there has to have been a professional intervention at some point where somebody assessed them and said, hey, you meet this criteria, so you're narcissistic. Or, as you said, ADHD. Somebody has to have done a battery of tests. There are numerous tests that we do to say you have ADHD. So what most people might have are traits of these conditions.
Right.
And everybody would have some trait of something, but that doesn't rise to the level of a disorder. So you might be this person who doesn't take criticism very well. But then you're aware of this, but then you have modeled your life in a way that you're able to manage that. That doesn't make you a narcissist. And that doesn't make you, borderline personality disorder. That doesn't make you, sick. It's just a trait that you have to work on in order for you to be successful in life.
But the distress that it's caused, I don't know that it can be ignored, because I think the reason it became a big, it actually, somebody says, and I think I read it somewhere, it became a huge conversation when Trump first took office in 2016. Globally, it became, am I right? Or is there...
Because of labeling again, I'd argue.
So
it's that tendency to...
So these politicians are prominent. They're in the public, and they do things and say things, and people collect that information and arrive at certain conclusions about them. That's fair to say. But that doesn't mean that they have a diagnosis.
Fair enough.
And so I will give you an example. A politician who engages in very dramatic acts and says very dramatic things when they have a crowd in front of them and so on. And then they come to my clinic and we sit down and have a conversation. And I ask, it is said that you do this, you do this, you do this, you do them on TV even. The guy says, that's my job. That's my day job. I act for the people.
It's a theater.
So he's not sick. He's an actor. It's the same way you watch a movie and you see a guy doing very interesting things and like, hey, that guy is sick. Then you meet them and they're very nice, balanced fellows. And they tell you, yeah, I was acting because that's how I earn a living. So that is the danger of labeling. Because when you label somebody, you're labeling them based on the things you see. And they might have an explanation for
But it's also how it affects you. I promise I'm leaving this topic just now. I promise.
I'm laughing because that's been the biggest, like, interacting with politicians. I'm just like, wow, so you're not like this all the time.
There you go.
Or I think the reason it's became a big conversation, and I say that not lightly, it's kind of taken over socials, even with doctors weighing in, is whether it's a family member. I think it's somebody who makes you feel imprisoned within your emotions because they don't allow you to express yourself. And whether even when you do, you're blamed for how you express yourself. So elements of gaslighting and heavy to a point where there's a community of people who follow a certain person on YouTube, for example, who now I started saying, oh, that's what it is with, for example, my mother or with my boyfriend or my girlfriend. And then you notice the traits are almost similar across the board.
So it is true that among us, there are people with those problems. So it is true. It's not to say, so, and some of the labeling is probably accurate in the sense that if this person actually went and was assessed and tested, we would find that it is true they have this problem. So that is true. However, there are others who are not going to get that diagnosis. They're mislabeled. And the mislabeling is where the danger is. So if we all agree that Trump is this kind of person, we will treat him in a certain kind of way. And yet, there is a chance that if you have a conversation with him in a clinical setting, you might find, hey, this is my act, this is my public persona, this is how I want people to believe I am, because that's what gets me votes, and that's how I earn a living.
It works.
Yeah, it works for me. And so that might be, that's the danger. Of course, there's a chance that I could assess him and say, hey, you are actually unwell. There's a chance, but not without a proper assessment. The labeling then is risky.
Right.
That's
Two of our fixers have brought something that was at the back of my mind, but they've put it very well. My print says the vast majority of Kenyans can't afford a medical checkup, resort to religion as an alternate, or an alternative, sorry. Is or can religion provide a solution? Can God be an answer? And then there's Gatobu Emmanuel on X saying, it's better now, but I'm a victim of mental health, and I really thank God because by reading the Bible, I was able to conquer my mental illness. I would advise my fellow youths to read the Bible. So yes, to that question, can religion be an answer?
And as you answer that, Prof, our extras, if you'd like the mic, request for the mic, we'll give you the mic. We'd like to hear you contributing to this conversation. You can even call, you can speak, you can ask a question, or you can contribute. I can see Psych Sleuth is back. You've been given the mic as a speaker, but hold on to that. I hope this time we'll be able to hear you. Let's hear the response from Prof on this, and then you can come in, Psych Sleuth.
So religion is something that people acquire. All right, and different people acquire different religious beliefs based on the exposure that they get as they grow up in life. And so it would be very difficult for me to prescribe a religion to somebody with a mental illness, because everybody has a right to believe in different religious ideas. So our understanding of religious groupings is that it's part of social support. And social support is absolutely important in mental health. So if you get your social support through a religious grouping, by all means, do it. If you get your social support by having other groups that are not necessarily religious, by all means, go for it. Another potential benefit from religious groupings is they have religious leaders, some of whom would be well-trained, and when a person goes to them with a problem, they might be able to pick up on it and say, hey, I think this is a mental illness and you need to get help. And they might point you in the right direction. Some of them don't do that, but we are hoping that with advocacy and understanding, that many of them will be able to recognize and say, when this person comes and tells me that they feel guilty because they have sinned, this is guilt that is part of a depressive episode rather than just guilt, and they send them for help. So that is how I see religion and religious groupings being beneficial, rather than giving a prescription and saying, if you have depression, read the Bible. So that can be problematic because reading the Bible will not treat severe depression, all right? Somebody needs an intervention that is beyond what they can do for themselves. And this requires a mental health professional. And the problem with that is then a person with those symptoms feels like, I am not a good religious person. This is why I'm getting my depression. And so it makes it worse. And the people who believe the same way, they would make them feel that way. They say, why don't you just pray? You should be okay if you pray. God is powerful and he should heal you. But people have depression that requires external intervention, that requires them to see a doctor, to see a psychologist, to be diagnosed and to be given treatment that might include medication, psychotherapy, and changes in their social environment. So it's not enough to just say, would you say the same? This is what I ask people. Would you say the same for somebody who has a stroke? So just pray. I mean, you should get better. Or somebody who has diabetes. You just read the Bible and your sugar should be okay. No. Read the Bible fine if you believe in it and this is your religion. But then also seek help.
Seek help. Proper help.
Yeah.
Doc, before you bring in Sal Gakuo, there's also a question that I saw on YouTube and somebody, it was just a comment. And I think they were taking it on a lighter note, but maybe it's a question to ask. So preachers who say that they're prophets because they've had, the voice. Because of this conversation that we've had today, some people will say, you're hearing...
like, are you anointed or are you schizophrenic? Where's the line between?
So
and on that note, I mean, the church has been known to perform exorcisms where it was mental illness and other forms of
as we said earlier, communities have labeled behaviors, feelings, thoughts that today we recognize as mental illness. They have labeled them differently in order to understand them. So they have seen people who hear voices, and in the past they might have labeled them as people who are having supernatural experiences and given them special places within their communities as people, and those that has been helpful because it has created meaning to those symptoms that we are calling mental illness. But today we know better. We know that, we can help you stop hearing voices and have a fulfilling life and so on. So that happens. And many people with mental illnesses sometimes might develop extreme religious thinking and behaviors and so on. And it becomes a symptom of mental illness that we need to manage. So I would not go as far as saying that the preachers who say they are prophets and they have heard the voice of God and so on, that they're mentally ill. I wouldn't go as far as saying that. Again, just to caution that then, for me to say somebody's mentally ill, we need to have a conversation in a clinical setting and say, hey, these voices you say you're hearing, what exactly are they? Because
I will tell you. I will tell you, Prof.
Okay.
If Moses came to your clinic those days and he said the Lord told him, drop this stick and became a snake, you would have written right there, this person needs medical intervention urgently.
I wanted to say, are you going to hold that note? Because I know we have some people who want to take the mic, but let's come back to that. I think it's important.
Vincent Ogembo has requested the mic, and you have the mic now, Vincent. Thank you for joining us on our X Space. What do you have to say? Good morning.
Vincent.
There was Vincent.
Vincent, or we can go to Charles Okemwa. Charles Okemwa, good morning. You have the mic.
Charles, you can unmute and give us your thoughts.
Yes, good morning.
Morning.
So my question goes to, like you say in Kenya, the way the politicians lie to the masses. Like, are those symptoms of mental health?
Mental illness, It's a good question, Charles.
That's a good question,
Before you respond to that one, there's also, I think Salgakuo is back. Huh? Salgakuo, are you back? Yes, you're there. Check the mic.
Thank you very much. You can hear me now, right?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. So I just wanted to say that I'm a great fan of Prof. And there is a recent study that showed that apart from the men and women in uniform, that is the police and all that, then the number one, the ones who lead in mental illnesses and also healthcare workers. And me as a graduate clinician, I just wanted to know, why is it that healthcare workers have a higher tendency of getting mental illness? And I also wanted to request Prof if he can tell us where he is, because I've been treated before by one of his colleagues, Dr. Kanana, when I lost my dad. And I just wanted to know where he is, maybe if I can refer patients to him. And also he should come back to Facebook because his posts are very therapeutic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You came out of Facebook. Self-preservation. Was it a form of self-preservation?
And this is something I would advise people. There's a time when you need to take a break from social media, because there's such a thing as too much social media. So there's a time you need to take a break, and I have taken a break, and it's for my own mental health as well. Good. When a politician tells you things and then they turn out to be lies, you need to call them out as liars. It's not useful to label it as mental illness. It's more useful to say you lied. Because when you label it as a mental illness, then you make the diagnosis of a mental illness to be the excuse for this person to lie. It takes away the responsibility from the individual. So if a politician lies to you and you figure out it was a lie, you tell them you're a liar because you lied, and you hold them accountable politically for lying to you.
What's a pathological liar?
So a pathological liar...
Just asking.
A pathological lie is a person who can't help but lie. I mean, they lie when they don't have to. So you ask them, your name is Eric. He says, no, my name is not Eric. But everybody knows you're Eric, you know. So that's a pathological liar. He lies when he doesn't have to. He makes up stuff. He, picks things from thin air and places, even when they don't have to. Okay. So that's a pathological liar. I'm not going to say anything beyond that, but yeah, I think you understand. Some of those said in the context of a personality disorder. Mm-hmm. So somebody might have an antisocial personality disorder. Antisocial personality disorder is a condition where the person doesn't have regard for social norms and rules and so on, and they probably enjoy watching other people suffer, and they enjoy causing harm to other people, and they excuse everything. So if you ask him, why did you do that? He says, hey, but that guy deserved it, or that guy started it, or that guy was threatening me, and so on, even when everybody can see that that wasn't the reason. So in the context of antisocial personality disorder, lying is normal to a person who has antisocial personality disorder. Okay. And similar conditions as well. But if they're a politician or if they're a person in authority, you hold them to account. You don't say you're saying this because you're sick. Mm-hmm. You say you're saying this and there should be...
Because you're a liar.
There should be consequences. Yeah, there should be political consequences. Unless you as a person who's being led by this person are okay with being led by a liar, then you can excuse it and say, hey, it's all right. He's a liar, but I like him. Yeah. Okay. And so on and so forth. We will not label political actions with a mental health diagnosis because in a way that removes responsibility from them and says, okay, maybe if we treat him, he'll be fine. Okay. But he will not be a fine leader because he's a liar.
Two more people to speak on the X space, and they've asked them.
And there was this question that was asked about the high risk among health workers.
Yes.
Healthcare giving is a high pressure environment, and you interact with people who have needs, and you have to give of yourself quite a lot, and this increases your risk of mental ill health, just like in most of the caring professions. And so it is important for healthcare workers to also have access to help. They have to have access to mental health care, and they have to have access to health care as well. In this country, many health workers cannot afford the care that they are giving. And so this needs to be fixed. So this is something important that was brought up by the person who asked the question. Where I am is not very important. I think more important is where are mental health services available. And as I said, all public hospitals should have either care available or a linkage to mental health services. And many of the big private hospitals also have access to mental health care services and a linkage to them. Obviously, I'm at the Aga Khan University and in the medical college, and we run mental health services at the Aga Khan University Hospital as well. So those services are available at Aga Khan University Hospital as well.
We have 4 minutes, and I know there's the people taking the mic.
Let's give them to Jemo. Jemo K, you had requested the mic. You have the mic, and then we shall hear from Minister Brian. It's mean Brian K. So Jemo, go first. Jaimo K, Jaimo Kalog, and then you have Minister.
Please unmute so that we can hear you.
Or maybe that's not there. Minister, you can take the mic. We also have Joseph Ladu.
Who do we have now?
Hey?
Okay. Please.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep. Go ahead, Jaimo.
Yes, thank you. I want to ask the doc,
yes,
what duration does it take for a person who has had fever?
Kindly repeat your question. You broke off a little bit. What does...
Oh, okay.
I think you're not... Jemo, you can type the question. Maybe it's easier.
Yeah.
Just type the question, Jemo. It's easier. We have Brian K. Minister. Brian K., go ahead.
Thank you so much, Eric and Janet, for a wonderful show. I appreciate the comments that have been... I know I came in a little bit late, but at least I've tried to catch up with the show. It's been pretty amazing. And it really comes to my, I just want to make a small contribution. It's not really that I have a question, but I want to bring it in the Christian perspective, if it's okay with you guys.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
When it comes to mental health, sometimes people now tend to ignore the spiritual aspect, because sometimes before the problems becomes physical, it first of all occurs in the spiritual aspect. Because before somebody becomes mental ill, it does not, when we say that we are treating the mental aspect, first of all, we are just treating the outer part. You've not considered the inner part of that person, because the person is comprised of three things. He has a soul, he has a body, and he has a spirit. When you're saying that you're treating the mental illness, most of the doctors and all those who have studied that part, they tend to treat the outer part, which is just the body part. But they have not tapped into the spirit of that man to understand what caused that. The Bible says in the book of Proverbs chapter 18 verse 4, it says, the spirit of a man will sustain his infirmity, but a wounded spirit who can bear? If the spirit of the man is wounded, no matter how much you give the drugs or whatever, that man will still have the mental challenge. So it begins by him, first of all, understanding the inner part of that person. If that inner man is still wounded, the outer person cannot be better. Okay. So it starts by you, first of all, to examine, is it spiritual or is it physical? So the best part of it, me, I always say that if a person is mentally ill, first of all, it's better to examine his spirit first. What has he been fed?
Thank you. In the interest of time, thank you so much for putting that across. Spirituality is so individual, right?
Yeah, so, and I would emphasize that how we look at mental health, we look at it from a biological perspective, a psychological perspective, and a social perspective. In the social domain, we have culture, we have traditions, we have religion, we have politics, we have economics, and so on and so forth. So it is important, all those are important. I would just say that from a spirituality angle, everybody has an explanatory model to explain how people behave. Mm-hmm. And even when people are behaving abnormally, there's an explanatory model that we use based on our background, based on our beliefs, based on our systems, and so on. So some Christians will have a certain outlook on why a person is behaving the way they are. The most important thing is if you go and see a mental health professional, the mental health professional will consider your behavior, feelings, thoughts from biological, psychological, and social perspectives, and ought to be able to uncover the underlying issue and help you deal with it. But we do not prescribe a specific way of thinking, a specific way of belief, a specific way of looking at things. But we accept that all humans have an explanatory model. It has a basis, and we have to acknowledge that.
And it comes from a need.
Yeah, it comes from a need, and we use that to help you cope in your circumstances. If you're a Muslim, we will manage you in the context of being a Muslim. If you're a Christian, we'll manage you in the context of being a Christian, and so on and so forth.
We have to leave it there, unfortunately. I wish this was another hour, but you need to come back, I think.
Yeah, I'm happy to.
Much.
Happy to. Thank you very much.
Professor Lukoye Atwoli is a professor of psychiatry and dean at the Aga Khan University Medical College, and also deputy director at the Brain and Mind Institute. Next conversation will be on that, and on what you do and what you've uncovered from this institute. Thank you for tuning in to these conversations the whole of this week. We have been fixing the nation one conversation at a time, many conversations. What's coming up next?
Right, we have salsa, first of all, in the studio, Hapatu, with Mwikali and Winnie. We're going to have salsa story time and an R&B artist, the rise of R&B and pop music in Kenya. There's going to be Ntinyari in the studio. But yes, like Eric said, thank you so much. It's been a good, yes, the salsa as well, as we've mentioned. But thank you to our fixers. Thank you, Mariam Bishar, Janet Bogwa, Eric Latif. Wishing you all a fantastic weekend ahead. You can find all these conversations on the Fixing the Nation playlist on YouTube. Have a good one.